my friend Drew gave me a Chuck's Barbecue shirt that I've been wearing around. Chuck's Barbecue and Jim Bob's are owned by the same family in Opelika, Alabama. And this Jim Bob's actually is in LaGrange. My friend Curtis brought it to me. The original Jim Bob's that I worked at with Curtis and his brother Kerry was, and his wife Katie, and so many people. My friend Brent, my friend Jim Spain, my friend Richard Long, Adam Long. I mean, so many people. The Curtis and Kerry Wallace. We all worked at the Opelika Jim Bob's on First Avenue. And then it closed. So there's a Jim Bob's in Tigertown, and then Curtis has a Jim Bob's in LaGrange, Georgia. And I think Adam Long opened one in Alex City. I don't know. But this one's from LaGrange. So, but I do finally have a Jim Bob's Chicken Finger shirt, which is where I used to work and where I, fried up chicken fingers. I've talked about it, but I never really get into the full details of what happened. But, I used to work at Jim Bob's when I was a senior in high school. And also when I was a senior in high school, I started to experiment with drugs. And I was really getting into some stuff. And I took acid for the first time. Now, I don't know if it was the first time, but I took it and I stayed awake all night with my friends, and which is always what happened. I don't know what's going on with acid, but LSD, whatever you want to call it, but we stayed up all night. And then the next day, you start to come down or crash or come back to reality, whatever. And now you've not slept, and I don't do well on no sleep. If I have no sleep, there's two things that struggle for me. No food and no sleep. Now, food I can do if I'm intentionally fasting. If I say, I'm fasting, something happens, and I don't crumble in that way. But no sleep, I really start to struggle. I start to slip into sadness, depression, and I want to cry. So this was in high school. I'm working at Jim Bob's. I have done acid. I've stayed up all night, and then I have to go into Jim Bob's the next day. And I didn't know this about myself at the time, that I would crumble at sleep exhaustion and do an acid. And I go into Jim Bob's that day, still out of my mind, really. I don't even know if Curtis knows this or Carrie or any of those. I don't know if they know this about me. But I went in and I was on the verge of depression and a small mental breakdown. And they were short-staffed. Someone had not been there earlier in the day. And so when I walked in, they were slammed, and they were like, hey, the dishwasher didn't show up today. So I look in the back, and the sink is just piled up with dishes, and everybody looks run ragged, and it looks awful. Now, as an adult, as a grown man with a decent work ethic, what I would do now is I would go, well, let's get it, and I would just get it in gear. I would start knocking out dishes or helping cook, whatever they need. I would jump right in there. But a 17-year-old on a head full of acid and no sleep had a little bit of a breakdown. And they go, you're going to have to wash dishes and make sauce and cook, and it's going to be a long day. And I didn't know what to do. So I said, okay, well, let me go ahead and take my break. And then I left, and I never came back. And I'm pretty sure I did cry that day. I'm pretty sure later that day I put on a song, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain by Willie Nelson, and I think it made me cry. But that's neither here nor there. But that's what happened. Was a wild time, and that's why I quit Jim Bob's. And I'm technically, I always say this, but I technically didn't quit. I just went on break, and I've not returned from break. And then that Jim Bob's closed. So I'm always on break until someone opens a Jim Bob's back in that location. I can't come off break. So I hope somebody will do that. You know what they did was they sold it from the family, but it remained Jim Bob's. And Jim Bob's, you know, was a Christian family, and they had Bible verses in frames on the walls, and they're a good family. You know, you never know about people. I learned something about a friend of mine just last week. You never know about people, but as far as I know, they're a good family and they're good people. And when they sold Jim Bob's, they kept the name Jim Bob's. The restaurant kept the name, but they got rid of all the Bible verses and they got rid of the Christian vibe in there, and it went under. So, you know, don't take God out of Jim Bob's. That's what I've always said.